From Anshe Sfard Bethel Emeth Congregation, it's time to take 10 minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion of Parshat Shemot, Foreshadowing Greatness. If we look at the beginning of Parshat Shemot, beginning of Exodus, we find three stories about Moshe Rabbeinu, about Moses, our teacher. And everyone likes to point to the fact that these were truly foundational stories in the forming of the personality of Moshe, our teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu. But exactly how it does so is an interesting question. Some have pointed out the notion of his different roles, that he plays a role, whether it's the story of the Egyptian hitting the Jew and how he slays him, that he's interested in saving the Jews from the oppressor. The second story about two Jews fighting, this shows his interest in inter-Jewish relations. And finally, the story in which he's most disinterested, where he doesn't know them at all. He's not a party, he's not Midianite, they're not Jewish, they're not Egyptian, and here he saves the daughters from the shepherds who wanted to take their water, from saving Jew from Gentile, Jew from Jew, and as a totally Gentile environment. He's interested in all three scenarios. That's interesting, but still it doesn't connect with the later stories that we learn about. But Rabbi David Sykes, recently here, a scholar in residence here at the Anshe Sfard Bethel Emeth Congregation here in Memphis, Tennessee, who wrote a recent book called Patterns in Genesis and Beyond. It describes there, and I'd like to add a bit of my own twist to it, how these three stories actually prefigure all of Moshe's life. The Torah more has interesting thought before we get to that, which is that he says, you have a concept of chazaka. In the Jewish law, if someone does something three times, they've established themselves as a pattern, that they tend to do that. Moshe showed three times that he is a savior. Vayakam Moshe vayoshian, he rose up and he saved them. That's what he does. He's an activist. And as we spoke on another occasion, it's only at the end of the parsha that he regains this passion, this youthful passion that he had to save people, to deal with situations, to adjudicate. Rabbi Sykes suggests that the three roles he plays later on are all alluded to here. Firstly, saving a Jew from their oppression. That's what happens. He saves the Jews from their oppression. And then he smites them. He gives a makkah, vayachet hamitzri. He gives a makkah. He gives an attack, a plague, so to speak, an attack against the Egyptian, as he will eventually smite the Egyptians for their smiting of the Jews. He deals with one Jew against the other, because he's going to be a sar v'shofet. He's going to be the head of all the different courts that Jethro will set up later on in Parshat Yitro. He is a lawmaker, lawgiver. And finally, Vayakam Moshe Vayoshian. Moses arose and he saved them, because he's going to be the savior later. Vayosha Hashem, Vayomahu, he's going to save them when? With a situation of water. A water situation, saved the daughters of Midian, got them the water, and he will save the Jews at the sea with the splitting of the sea, case of water. Brilliant analysis by Rabbi David Sykes. You could also suggest that his different roles are played out here as well. The saving the Jews from the Egyptians, we all know that that's a clear role that he has. Number two, dealing with internascent fighting. We know that he's going to have to deal with a very wayward people. People are always complaining, and especially the rebellion of Korach, the complaints of the people against him. He's going to have to deal not only with Jews fighting against each other, but complaining to him as well, yelling at him, and they're not going to give him a big thank you, a big mishaberach, as we say. They're not going to be his biggest fans. He's going to have to deal with Jews who are going to be difficult as well. It's not always easy to lead people. And finally, he's going to be a savior. He's going to save people from their oppression and send away those who are afflicting them. So we see that these three stories are not just incidental stories, but they foreshadow everything that's coming up. The Torah is Torah Hashem Tamima, as Rabbi Sykes points out on numerous occasions. The Torah is complete. The three stories are not random, but they describe three realms of activity. They describe the establishment of a chazaka, of a pattern, and 3 roles that he's going to play, the 3 hats that he's going to wear. It also foreshadows something negative as well. That is, perhaps as some would suggest, the hitting of the rock one day, that there will be problem at the end of his life through the water, through the bringing of water, problem of internascent Jewish fighting, problem of Jews complaining against him, the Savior himself. Of course, it's God who brings the salvation, but he's the one who is the intermediary for the salvation. They will, ironically, actually complain against him, and he's already prepared for that. Everything he needed to know is right there in those 3 stories. It's a foreshadowing. It's the beginning of this book. Moshe Rabbeinu would rise to be one of the great leaders. Here in our parsha, we learn a little bit about his makeup. What makes him tick? He has this tremendous passion to save a Jew from oppression. He can't take the Jews being oppressed. And he gets mad at the end of the parsha. How could you not have saved the Jewish people? He's mad. He's a person who can't take one person afflicting another. He can't imagine that Jews couldn't get along when they're being oppressed from the outside. He's a person who can't imagine that there'd be unfairness, because ultimately he's all about bringing law and order into society, as he'll learn from God the ultimate laws of organization of a society. This is the parsha. This is the beautiful foreshadowing in this parsha, but it also tells us of the great potential that every human being has to find those stories within our early childhood that tell us something about who we are, hopefully to bring us forward also to play our role in the salvation. Each one of us has a role in the future of the Jewish people, and we have to find that role by analyzing what it is we're most passionate about. Thank you for joining us here at the Anshe Sfar Beth Emet congregation. Join us each week for our discussion of the Parsha and the various holidays. And thanks to Jason Lefkowitz, our producer. Thank you.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein. To learn more, visit ASBEE.org.